Oh, Shachas usually got usually. Anyone. At least you know what the bang around.
I hate banging. I just can't cope with banging. I don't know why. Yes. I don't.
When you're a little kid,
I know. I never liked it when I was a kid.
You enjoy it.
I never enjoyed that as
I hated it as a
That's it.
I was engaged in the shoe. I never enjoyed it as a kid.
No, the worst is after tennis. You're not interested at all of it. At least you know what the bang around.
I hate banging. I just can't cope with banging. I don't know why. Yes. I don't. I know. I never liked it when I was a kid.
You enjoy it.
I never enjoyed that as a kid. I was engaged.
Tired. Boom, boom. You remember that song?
Good evening, Ben. You've been roped into everything.
How are you?
Oh, Hashem. We're discussing what city? Manchester City. Somebody wants to know how is Kala to watch such a thing in the base of Bedouin. He doesn't even know. How would he know? He won't know what city is.
He's not in
Not got a clue.
Never heard of it.
Never heard of them.
Never heard of them, Matt. How would you have heard of them? Which Gemara is it in?
Greek one.
What?
Greek one.
I remember they come to say, who do you support? You come from Manchester, who do you support?
What did you say? Barcelona.
Support Toyo.
Oh.
If I would support her, I don't support that either. Actually, there's Manchester Shiur making a collection tonight. What's going on? Yes. No, they're not doing charity because they don't use the internet.
How are they getting the money then?
They're making phone calls. They're asking to people to go out and asking.
Put your phone on silent, everyone.
Why? Don't you want to? What?
To make sure my phone's actually on share.
What's happening in the building from the old institution?
They have Koil there.
They have a Koil. They had a school there. They had a girls' school, a business or girl or something. Yeah.
Massive house. Setback. You don't see it from the road. Massive.
Oh.
Beautiful house.
It's also a respect place to live, a bit low.
Yeah. And you would never tell why? Because when I was doing work in eventually she was, all of a sudden this McLaren put out.
What's a McLaren?
A buggy.
Buggy. Not a buggy.
Yeah, it's a buggy.
It's a buggy, but it's also a car.
Very expensive buggy.
I'll go
About
McLaren buggy.
£200,000 buggy.
Right. Oh wow, we're thinning out quickly. Okay, we're starting a new perek, a new topic, a big simcha. We're going to learn how to roast the Korban Pesach.
How to make a proper barbecue.
Oh, that's right. How to make a proper barbecue. Keitzad tzoylin es Pesach. Ein Daled Amud Aleph, top of the page, new Mishnah, new perek. Keitzad tzoylin es Pesach. How do you roast the Korban Pesach? Mevin shvud shavimoy. You take a spit, that's a wooden stick made out of a pomegranate tree. You stick it into the mouth until the anus. Put it all the way through the body. Take a stick and you push it all the way down through the body.
Is it not cut open already from taking out the
Yes, the mizrach was you shechted it, but you didn't take the head away. You shechted it, and then you pulled out the intestines and the imurim which went on the mizbeach, and now you've got the main body of the sheep. Still basically homeless. But we had in the last pair that you tear up a bit. This is a very interesting thing. That I don't know, I've never done this, but if you take a stick of pomegranate, the beginning, the closer to the trunk is thick branch, and the branch gets thinner and thinner and thinner towards the end. Like any tree. So you stick it into the mouth, and the end comes out through the anus. Then what happens is you've got the thick part of the wood by the mouth and the thinner part of the wood by the other end of the animal. Then you hold the animal up, you hold the wood upside down.
So it doesn't fall down. Why
Why does it fall down? Oh, that's what Tosis says. You could have written Tosis yourself. Says this is that's the way to do it, because if you do it like that, the wood in theory, I'm exaggerating. Let's say it goes like a triangle. It doesn't really go like a triangle. It goes like this. So that sheep is, or the goat is a head down, and their head is the lower. You take the big trunk of wood, you stick it in through the mouth to the other end. Then what happens is the sheep will not slip down. Why won't it slip down? Oh, very good. That's what Jesus says. And that's the way you get it. And that way, then what happens is you hold it over the fire, or fire at the bottom, and that way, that's the
Not this way.
Oh, you see what Chaim said? Not this way.
Not sideways.
On the pictures, it's machlokas, but the way Tis understands is it's this way. Yes, a shvama, is upwards. You're right, like a shvama thing. Very good. So you take a piece of wood, stick it in through from one end of the animal to the other, to the inner. From Noisein is kvav, that's the legs, Meov and its stomachs, and the Teiche Tivrabi Sekniri. That means what happens is you had the animal, you cut it open, you took out the intestines to clean them, and then you take the legs which you cut off, and the intestines, and you stick them into the animal, and then you roast it like that. Why? Because the Torah says that means the more you can make it whole, the better it is. Tosfos in the second Tosfos, which is on the later Gemara, says it's all lechatchila. But diavad, if you take piece by piece and you roast it over the fire, that's also okay. But this is the best way to do it. The best way to do it is to take off the legs from the knees down, cut off the legs, plus the stomach, which you rinsed, stick it all inside the animal's body, and then put the stick through from one end to the other, from mouth to anus, and then stick it into the fire, and that's the best way to do it. Rabbi Akiva says that's not the best way to do it. It's a kind of cooking. We will see again and again that the most important part by roasting Korban Pesach is to have no liquid. It should be roasted, not cooked. What's the difference between roasting and cooking? Roasting is a fire onto meat. Cooking is you've got water, you've got a liquid, and then you've got heat, sauce, etc. Says Rabbi Akiva that the legs and the intestines inside, what happens is like this. Because you stuff them inside the carcass of the animal, and then you put the carcass on the fire, so the fire is cooking, is roasting the outer part of the sheep, but the inside of the animal is getting not roasted, it's getting cooked, and therefore it's no good. You hear? Yeah, it's clear. If you put something inside, here's you've got the sheep, right? And you stuff it inside with the intestines and you put it on the fire. So it's as if you're cooking it, as if the carcass is the pot and the intestines inside are getting cooked in the juices.
Then you should make the sheep inside out then.
Oh, let's see what Kiva says. You hang it on the outside. That means what you do is the carcass itself, like Rabbi Saglir, but the legs and the intestines, you wrap around the stick on the outside. So you've got like a whole sheep. And then I went online to see there was no good pictures. Who?
8 minutes back,
Nice pictures of the roasted Korban Pesach. I looked at Daf Chaim, it didn't have that charts, but no nice pictures.
I don't know what this is.
No, that doesn't really help you. It's just this. Yeah, I saw those pictures, but I wanted one of the roasting. No, I saw that Daf Chaim. Yeah. Okay. Again, so there's two ways to roast the Korban Pesach. Either you stuff everything in the carcass, you put it on, you gain as Roshal Krov, you lose this a kind of bishop. And the second thing is to put it on the outside. Now, the Sfas Emes writes, I was very happy to see the Sfas Emes side, he says that it's only lechatchila again. Even Rabbi Akiva holds up at the end, it's okay because it's not real cooking. It's roasting, it looks like cooking. I want to show you one word of Rashi. By me, it's the last of the wide lines of Rashi. You push them onto the stick, higher than the mouth of the sheep. Higher in this sense. What does it mean higher than the mouth of the sheep? If you remember a minute ago, we talked about Tosfos explains that you put the head down and the other end of the anus of the other end, and you put the stick, which is the rider part at the bottom. So now you're wrapping the intestines and the legs around higher than the head. So where's that?
By the feet. By the back of it.
The higher, no. He says not like that. He says that higher than the head over here means lower. It's higher than the head if it would be head first, but since you're doing this way, so the legs and the intestines are actually at the bottom of the wood, they're really closest to the fire.
I see that.
So how do you stick them on? You wrap them around
No,
the
but
stick.
if it sticks in the head's facing towards the fire,
Yes.
it's higher than the.
You've got that carcass like this, and then the bottom of the stick you wrap around the intestines, and then you put the thing onto the fire. So the actual kuntra be'akiva, what's closest to the fire? The intestines are closest to the fire. So what will the sheep look like? It look like a sheep with a helmet on, right? Because you've got the animal, the legs, you've got the body of the sheep with the head at the bottom, but around the head, you're wrapping around the legs and the intestines. It looks like a bit like a helmeted sheep. Says the Mishnah. What? You're not allowed to roast the Korban Pesach on a metal spit or on a grid. Rashi explains why. And somebody asked me that the same question. I don't know the answer. But the Gemara explains in literally 2 seconds. Why does Rashi have to explain? But the idea is, we'll explain since Rashi says, we're always looking to do tzliesh, roasted on the fire. Metal, what's the difference between metal and wood? Anybody know? Oh, conducts heat. He's a scientist. Conducts heat. Now, if you put it on metal spit, what happens is like this. The end of the metal spit gets boiling hot. It gets boiling hot. And then the heat spreads through the metal. And then inside the sheep, how is it getting roasted? From the fire or from the metal? From the metal. So that's no good. If you use the wood, it's okay. And the same idea with the grid. The grid has the same problem. That what happens is it gets burnt. If you put something on the grid, it's not getting roasted from the fire. It's getting roasted from the heat of the metal. On the grid, and who asks the question that it's a contradictory story. You just said to us, you're not allowed to, and here you say you are allowed to. So again, in our Mishnah, there are mainly 2 topics. One, how do you do the Korban Pesach? That means, where do you put the intestines and the legs? And the second thing is not to use metal. Says the Gemara. Why can't you use metal? Once a bit gets hot, it all gets hot. It gets roasted because of the metal. It has to be roasted from the fire, not from something else. For example, if you've got a fire and it's covered, let's say you put it inside an oven and then you put the Korban Pesach on the oven. That's no good. It's not roasted on the fire. It has to be roasted directly from the fire. Many times make a barbecue. That's the holidays. What you do is you take this disposable barbecues, you light a fire, then you put sausages on the metal. The heat often is coming from the metal of the barbecue, not from the actual fire of the metal, not from the fire itself. But they see let's use a date tree. What the Gemara does ask for 3 different kinds of trees. The Gemara answer is always the same. That we're looking for tzli'esh, roasted. What's the most important part about roasting is no liquid. We're going to find that pomegranate trees has the least amount of liquid. So again, let's take a date tree. I did is the shivi. Since it's got grooves, mapik mayo, the date tree, the wood is not smooth. I take a branch of a date tree, it's not smooth. It's got a lot of grooves on it. Since it's got a lot of grooves, what happens is sap comes out easily, and then instead of roasting it, it cooks it. It boils it. Let's take a fig tree. I did the mechalchel, since it's hollow, mapik maya, liquid will come out, and therefore it's like it's cooked. Take a sycamore tree or carob tree, etc. I did the isbe kitri, since it's got knots inside it. Some trees have knots where you've got where the other branches come off it. It looks like a knot. Mapik maya, liquid will come out. A pomegranate tree also has knots. Shia kitri, the knots are very smooth. A pomegranate tree less than a year old, the less bay kitri, it has no knots. So the Gemara suggests 3 different kinds of trees, and each time the Gemara tells us why not. A date tree has grooves, a fig tree is hollow, a sycamore tree has knots. But a pomegranate tree is not hollow, not groovy, and not got knots, either because the knots are smooth or because we're talking about a young. Ask the Stasemus again. So why can't we use a young date tree? So he says that even them, they already have the grooves and the knots and the chavish. So the pomegranate tree takes a year for the knots to come. But the other trees, the knots and the grooves and everything come immediately, and therefore it's no good. What?
If there is another tree that fits the criteria, is that ruled out?
Yeah, you could be. The more is obviously telling us that it isn't. And again, it's all lechatchila, but but you can use it. It is interesting. I was thinking today that reads we're going to have to find a very, very lot of pomegranate trees because every compass, yes, to 100,000 branches of trees.
Same age as sheep.
Why? There's millions of sheep in Australia and Canada and these places. No, not about Canada. No, you don't need so many sheep. Think about it. There's only about 12 million Yidden. Right? So let's say we don't know how many of us will be zeichet to see Mashiach. Oh, yeah. So the says like this. When you cut the pomegranate tree off the branch, off the tree, there sap will come out, because when you cut a branch off, there's always liquid where you cut it off. You let the part which you cut off be out of the sheep. So as we discussed before, you take a big tree, stick it through the animal. So then what happens is you take the piece at the end and you put it there. It should be outside the sheep, not within the sheep, and therefore it doesn't matter. He says it doesn't matter, you can use metal. The Rishonim explain, he holds, we said before, what's the problem with metal? What's the problem with metal? It's hot, and then the inside of the sheep won't be roasted by fire, be roasted by the heat of the fire of metal. He says, no, when you've got a carcass over it, it keeps it not, it won't get that hot, it won't matter. Well, it says, no, wood is not a good wood, a heat conductor, and if it's not a problem, metal, it is. So that is our sugya of the pomegranate, why we have to use Baruch Hashem. But notice this called Tanya, Rabbi Shmuel Kiveu Tuchtuch. Rabbi Shmuel would call the sheep of the Korban Pesach Tuchtuch. Does anybody know what a palindrome is?
So read it backwards and forwards the same way.
I made a mistake. I was looking at the wrong English word in my desire to show off my brilliance in English. Onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia. What's onomatopoeia mean? Onomatopoeia is a word where the word sounds like the noise, like bakbuk in a vid is a bottle. Why is a bakbuk a bottle? Because when you pour it, it makes bakbuk the kind of sounds. Onomatopoeia.
Sorry, he went to full school like we did say.
That's not so hard, Google it. So what happens is like this. The Gemara says that when they would roast the Korban Pesach according to Rabbi Yossi Agilili, they would put the pieces of the sheep inside the sheep. So what would happen is it would make a sound of the cooking of like a bubbling sound. So tuch was the kind of noise it would make. So that's why I would call it tuch. If you can imagine like a pot, like popcorn, what kinds of sounds does it make? Oh, have you ever heard of barbecue? If you listen carefully to barbecue, put chicken wings on a barbecue, it starts making crackling sounds. So over here, he would call the Korban Pesach, because what did he hold? He held like Rabbi Yossi Aglili, that you put the pieces inside. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Tarfon Kveu Gidi Mekulas, he called it an armed sheep. Why would he call it an armed sheep? Oh, he held like which shitta? Rabbi Akiva. So again, the way they would call the Korban Pesach, whether they called it tuchtuch or an armed sheep or armed goat, was to do that. The way they would describe it was the nafkamina of how they used to roast it. It's got two shittas how they used to roast it. It's a shame that I did look on Daf Echad to see. But you can picture it very easily. You've got the sheep. No, it's not. That's just pictures of animals. No, it hasn't got a picture of the animal being roasted on fire. Okay, you can picture it. Says the Gemara. Nowadays, we don't eat any roasted meat, say the night. That's how I'm in it. But in the older days, they were only makpid not to eat if it was identical to how they did it in Beis Hamikdash. So if it was different, let's say you roasted a piece of chicken or a small piece of meat, it was fine.
Only if you cook it afterwards.
No, what? Nowadays, if you cook it afterwards, it's okay, yeah. Yeah, saying, but in the olden days, they were only makbid if it was roasted identically to how it was done in the Beis Hamikdash. So what is that? If you roasted the entire sheep as one, if you cut off a piece, if you've got the whole sheep on a spit, you cut off one leg, let's say, or or you cooked one rather than roasted one, that's not a problem with mikulas. According to this price, you're allowed to roast, you're allowed to eat a cooked korban pesach, a roasted korban pesach, as long as it's not completely like the Beis Hamikdash. What means it's not completely like the Beis Hamikdash? That one piece of it is either cut off or one piece of it is cooked. The Gemara asks the following question: one piece cooked, how do you cook it? Answer: you take the sheep, roast it, cut off one leg, and cook it. The question is, you already told me that if one piece is cut off, it's not a problem. Why do you need to tell me if one piece is cut off or one piece is cooked, it's not a problem? If already one piece is cut off, it's not a problem. If you cut it off and then you cooked it, of course it's not a problem. The Beis needs to add that if you roasted or cooked the piece, it's not a problem. So the Gemara says, Hashta, now, even though you roasted it separately, you cut off one piece and you rested it separately, it's no good. Almost loy, nishlach mipoya. What's the chiddush of cooking? If already you say that if you cut off one piece and you roast the whole sheep, but that one piece is roasted independently, that's okay because it's not like the korban pesach. Kavachayma, if you cook, it means you cut it off, cook it, etc. Of course, it's not the korban pesach. You did a very complicated contraption. What you did is like this: you roasted the whole sheep, but one of the pieces you stuck inside the pot. So you got the whole sheep hanging on the spit. And let's say one part of it is hanging to the side, and then you put the pot on the flame and you cook it. So there you haven't got the head to that piece is cut off. After became it's mutter because at the end of the day one piece is cooked. So here we've got a head again. We nowadays don't eat anything which is roasted, say that. But those in the old days when they weren't so makpid, only if it was roasted exactly like it was done in the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore if you cooked one piece, that means if one piece was to the side cooking, or you cut off one piece and roast it separately, you are allowed to eat it Seder night, even if you want to miss it. Says the Omar Rabba, Hai Mulaisa Shai, you're going to a huge topic now of blood. The halacha is one is not allowed to eat blood. Because of that, there are two main ways to get rid of the blood of an animal. What are the two main ways of getting rid of the blood of an animal? Salting and roasting. Oh, salting is something test. You salt it or you roast it. One of the two options. There's machlik to show if you roast it, do you actually need to put a little bit of salt on or not? Somebody's had this very strong memory. It's a long time ago, 30 years ago, that they never used to kasher the liver, and you had to kasher it at home. I remember my father putting a tiny bit of salt on and putting it on the grill and roasting it. But nowadays the people are too fussy. And you get it every so often. It's been stories where people have bought liver thinking that it's been salted and roasted, and it hasn't. It's been mixture. You have to be careful to check.
They rarely sell it.
They don't sell it anymore?
No, not anymore.
Oh, okay. The Beis, those are the two cases.
For that reason, they're remarkable.
So now, the question is, what happens if you've got stuffed meat? That means what you do is it's a very fancy meal. You take a piece of meat and you stick it into another piece of meat and you roast it like that. What would you say? Mutter or asa?
You put the intestine and the leg on the inside.
Oh, very good.
Yeah,
So I
it's the
from our
same
Mishnah.
meat. But it's the same meat.
So what? If the problem is because of the
Right.
blood,
Right.
there's not a problem. This is our topic. That's why I came into our sugya. We're going on for a long time. We won't finish it today. I mean, Omar Rabbi, Hai Mulaisa Shaya. Rabbi holds stuffed meat mutter. Omar Rabbi v'kobol adama. That means you're roasting a piece of meat within another piece of meat. The inside piece of meat is oozing blood and is going to be absorbed in the outer piece of meat. As it's swallowing it, the outer piece, it's spitting it out with the fire. The fire draws out the blood from the inner piece into the outer piece, and then from the outer piece straight into the fire. You've got nothing to worry about.
You know how, as it's coming out, it can't be boiled.
Yeah.
Below.
I did the told the mifrat lo bola.
That's what we have as well. So why
Here it's not the
it out?
same. That is when you've got two separate things. That means you put it in the roasted, and it's got blood from another
So you have
source
like
on
the
it.
tracking sheet that it's got already,
Blood on. You're not mechayiv to worry about it.
yeah.
Because I did told mifrat lo bola.
The mocking sheet.
But here's a slightly different. It's a different. Okay, it's a different idea, but it's not the same.
outside, top is
when something is busy being poiled, no, that's a separate thing. Here, nothing's being poiled. It is being boilea. It is being boilea. No, it's being boilea from the inside and being poiled onto the outside. It's not, if you think about it. If you've got, don't get into it too much. When something is being poiled, for example, every time you roast a piece of meat, what happens is the blood's coming out. More discuss it. As it's spitting out the blood, it's got blood resting on it, and it's in a fire. So it should be boilea. The answer is, at the moment this fire is causing it to come out, it's not boilea. I did the third the mifrat no bola. No, so here the fire draws it. It is what's the word for it? It is poilated from both. As it's being boilea, it's being poilated. It's a separate halacha. Name of Messiah, as Chaim wanted to point out. You can stuff it. Is a right from our Mishnah that mulaisa, which is stuffed meat, is not. My time, you can't compare. Our Mishnah is different. Since you've got the shechita where you shecht and it's an open cavity, top of iron daled on base, made of divey, the top of the page, the blood flows out. And Tosfos points out that we're talking about a particularly big entrance, a big opening. So therefore that's not a shaila. And when you stuff meat, you do not make such a big opening, right?
For anything, there's meat layers and layers of meat as well.
It's one piece of meat. I don't know if is there a piece of meat one on top of the other stuff to each other?
No. The thicker it is, the same as stuffed meat.
That's not good.
First of all,
There's the kudah which can come later. There's a concept called dame voim is mutter. Blood which is stuck inside the limb is mutter. Yes, even mitzvah. As long as it hasn't moved. That means if the blood is moved out of the voim, it is forbidden. If blood stays within the voim, it is mutter. So it could be that the inner limb, inner flesh, we assume that the blood stays there. It's only the outer blood that comes out, and that goes straight out. The taste which I mentioned to you is the third taste on the page. The taste says, can't compare it to Malaisa because it's got a very big hope. Name of a silate, we'll try to bring another proof. Halev, the heart, you tear it, or you take out the blood. If you didn't tear it before, you can tear it afterwards. Because the heart has got in and outer chambers, and we should say that it should be pelea. And the answer is that as it's getting from the inner chambers, it's going out of the outer chambers. The heart is different because the surface of the heart is very, very smooth. And since it's very, very smooth, therefore it is okay, even without the principle kabbalah kachpolto. Now, if you look at Rashi, not that we eat the heart so often, if you ever do wish to eat the heart, which is brought down again in the Mechaber Yoder, that's about an Aleph or an Beis or something. Look at this, it says over here, the Shia, it says Rashi v'lo bola, Rashi makes big chiddush, that you're allowed to, normally we say that if you can either salt it to put it in a pot, or roast it and not put it in a pot, and not salt it. Why? Let's work it out. When you salt it, the blood comes away. And then you finish with it, you rinse it off, and then you can cook it. And then we're not chayshish there'll be any blood left that will come out during the cooking process and then get reabsorbed. We're okay with it. When you don't salt it, then you roast it. And then what happens is the blood just falls away and comes off. That is the two ways of getting rid of the blood. Rashi holds that if you take the heart without salting and without roasting, just stick it in a pot, it's also okay. You don't have to say kabbalah kachpolto. You don't say kabbalah kachpolto in the pot, because in the pot, once it stops being, it absorbs with the cooking process. And then Tosfos says that it doesn't think. It's you go to the top Tosfos, I don't know for the whole thing, it's quite long, not so long, but it's complicated. There's 4 lines at the end of Tosfos. And the reason why the heart is mutter is only because kabbalah kachpolto. So according to Tosfos, if you want to eat the heart, what's the correct way of doing it? Splitting it and roasting it. I don't know if you have to split it, roasting it. That's the kudah. According to Rashi, you don't need to even. According to Rashi, you can just cook it. According to Tosfos, you have to roast it. According to Tosfos, So either you open it up and salt it, or you roast it. According to Rashi, you could even cook it. Says the Gemara. So we just said now what? I don't know. Is that a halachic reason that we don't eat the heart? Because we're not sure how to do it. It's like the other. Okay. Says the Gemara. So till now we had Rabbi. What was Rabbi's main chiddush? What was Rabbi's main chiddush? Stuffed meat is permitted, right? Go home, say to your wife, you want to have a piece of meat within another piece of meat. As you take a chicken, stuff it with meat, roast it, you don't eat it. He made what's called a meat pie. A meat pie is you've got flour, like a crust, and you put the meat inside. What? Steak pie. Tosfos again argues with Rashi that we're not discussing a proper pie where you pop a dough. We're talking about just breading it like a schnitzel. Big machzor over here. That's the taste inside. Who's good to in pashtida? Pashtida is like a knish. Remember the time when we got the Rosh Hashanah, just smearing it. When the woman wants to take off her hair, she just smears some powder on. He says you can't use pashtita because it's too thick. The what you do is you put like a schnitzel where you put a tiny bit of a batter around. That's what we shouldn't explain it, like a batter around it. Again, either way, what happened was they made him this delicacy of a chicken with flour around it. If it tastes good, imali tafli. If the bread around it, for the batter around tastes good, I'll eat it. Oh, it's a raya, so it's not v'hor, Robin. It's not v'hor like this. Robin, it's a raya, so because you can see that stuffed meat is okay. As why he besmida, we talk about fine flour, the mafri that it comes into crumbs, meaning that the liquid comes out very, very easily. You can't compare fine flour to meat. Maybe by meat it is also, by fine flour it is mutter. It says, and they made him a duck with this batter, with this flour. If I would not have seen that it's clear, some say it means like a white glass. Others say it means like a new coin, like a newly minted coin. I want to eat from it. Again, he looked to see the liquid coming out, to see if it was clear. What? Is that so? No, here we're discussing melichim, we're discussing getting rid of the blood. It's nothing to okay. Why does it have to be clear? As also we're talking about white flour, which is very, very strong and thick. The halachas of the Gemara tells us 3 halachas. The smid, if it's fine flour, whether the juice is red or white, it is mutter. The chivasa, if it is a white flour, which is very thick, ikazig. If it's clear, because it's a chiva like glass, sharia. Iloy osid, the shak bochim, aspect osid, aspect sharia. We have 3 levels of making bread around meat. One level is that if it is clear, then again, sorry, we're going to go back on the flour. There are 3 kinds of flours. There's fine flour that it makes no difference whether the liquid is red or white, it is permitted. Why? Because since it's a fine flour, the roasting gets out all the blood, and therefore the fine flour does not absorb any of the blood. Then you've got the other extreme is white flour, which Rashi says is very hard and liquid doesn't get through it. And then it's the other way around, that whether it's white or whether it's red, it is also unless it's properly clear. And then you've got the in between normal flours, where it's like this. If it is a proper red, it is forbidden. If it's just a discoloration, then it is permitted. We're going to have more and more of this, and it's not easy Gemaras to get the technicalities, and also we don't do castring, unfortunately. Therefore, what happens? We do kasher, but we don't do it ourselves, so we don't have the same appreciation what kind of blood we're talking about. The Gemara said like this: Hai mulaisa, stuffed meat. Man da osa, those who forbid it afilu pumanatachas. Even if you do it upside down, that means you make a meat with an opening and you stuff it, and the opening is facing downwards. You might think the blood is dripping out. Nevertheless, it's osa. Man da shori afilu pumanel, even if the opening is upwards. You're allowed to eat stuffed meat, even if the opening, even if the hole where the blood is coming out is upwards. You're still allowed to, because we paskin like Rabbi, who says and therefore, as the fire is on the outside of the stuffed meat, what happens is it draws out the blood and it is okay. Now, there are 3 levels of kashering. Like this. The 3 levels of salting. There's where you cut it and salt it. That is the best. That is what we do. Cut it into pieces, salt it. That's what we do for our chicken and meat. We want to cook it. Then you've got putting it on a spit, which is, you don't salt it, but it's an open air that all the blood just falls away. And then you've got a 3rd level, and that is where you throw it onto a coal. Throwing it onto a coal is not as good as putting it on a spit. Why is it not good as putting it on a spit? Closes it, very good, because it closes it in. When you put it on the spit, the fire is on the outside and it just, all the blood comes out in all directions. When you put it down directly on a flat level of coals, and what happens is the blood doesn't have the same ability to escape. It gets shriveled into the meat, so it's not so good. But it's much better than putting it in a pot, because if you put it into a pot, nothing comes out. It stays in the liquid of the pot. That's the 3 levels. You've got salting. Salting is the best in the sense they can use it for anything, even for cooking. Then you've got spit. If you roast it first, yes. Yeah. That's only if you roast it first on a spit. Here we're talking about, we're not roasting on a spit, you're putting it on a bed of coals. Putting it on a bed of coals is a problem. Yes.
Cook the roasted one as well if you put a bit of salt on.
Yes, yeah, of course, because then you've roasted it and you've salted it, so it's even better. Once you've roasted, of course you can cook it afterwards. Yes. Once you've roasted it, it's kosher, then you can cook it.
The thing is, now when we do first, and then we put it in water.
Yes. So that's to rinse it all off. First we rinse it, then we salt it, then we rinse it. Now, the Gemara now discusses certain kinds of meat where the blood does not come out so easily. 3 kinds of meat, and the Gemara goes to all 3 exactly the same. It's very, very easy, Gemara. 3 kinds of meat. No. 3 kinds. You're right. Elsewhere, the Gemara talks about liver and others, which is harder. But here, the Gemara is talking about 3 kinds of meat, which is not so easy to get rid of the blood. One is meat that's been bruised. If you hit the cow very hard, and then the cow has a big bruise, the bruise is blood that's shifted from one place to another. That's what a bruise is. That's one. I don't know what the English term is. Another is the testicles of an animal. Here we have Machliks, I should speak Machliks again. Rashi says that when they get bruised, because they've got a membrane, what happens is getting the blood out is difficult. We're talking about beitzim of a male animal, the eggs of a male animal. Teresa says it's nothing to do with being bruised. It is simply to do with the fact that because they have a membrane, let's see the Teresa side, 4th Teresa. They got hit. The Pirish they can allow you kill more, they've got a membrane. The membrane around the eggs, the testicles of a male animal, make it that it's hard to get the blood out. That's the second. The third is the veins in the neck. The veins in the neck have a tremendous amount of blood. So those are the 3. What? The massive. So we've got 3 pieces of meat. Now, the Gemara is going to repeat the same thing, and it's mamish dead easy. You can finish it in 5 minutes. Basically, the Gemara says, if you sold these 3, brilliant, you can even cook it. If you put them on a spit, what's the din? That's okay. put them on coals, it's a machloikas. And every time the Gemara goes through the whole cheshbon again, and every time the Gemara passes, always the kula that you're allowed to. Okay.
Even with these three.
Even?
Even with these three.
Even with these three. Let's see inside. We're up to umtza, which is about a third halfway down or halfway down. Umtza, that's meat that's been bruised. Bei means eggs of a male animal, or mizraki and the veins. Pligi ba v'achavavida. Whenever we have a machlikas, usually it's of the maker of achas lechumma. The barman itlas, except for these three, to have achel lekula v'avuna lechumma, v'lechasik. So if you want to remember a rule of the thumb, whenever of achel and avina argue, what do we paskan? Lekula, very good. Whenever achel and avina argue, we always pass lekula. Most of the Torah, it comes out that avina is lekula. And we pass like a vinner. In these three cases of achas the kula, we pass like a bachel kula. So the Gemara goes through that each one. Again, hi umsa, bruised meat. The aspect it's red. Chodche, if you cut it to molche, if you salt it and cut it, it's good for pot, even for boiling, cooking. Shofte b'shvuda, if you put it through a spit, shoi. Why? Because made of dayav, because the blood will leak away. Gumi, put it on coals. It shrivels the blood inside. The fire draws out the blood. And now the Gemara goes to the same shtickle Torah again by the second shayla. By the eggs, testicles. If you cut it and salt it, you can even cook it in a pot and have the delicacy. You put them on a spit. Here it's slightly different. Before we said shofte b'shvuda, that you poke it with a stick, because they would do a big piece of meat. Here we do about small things, so you have to hang them on a spit. Shayon, why? Because made of that the blood oozes out. If you put it down on coals, the blood shrivels inside it. Because the blood gets drawn out by the fire. And again, the third Gemara, the same shayla, we're talking about veins. If you cut it and salt, because that's okay. Hang it on a spit, with the opening to the bottom. Why? Because we don't do it. You put it down on coals, because it shrivels up. The fire draws it out. And it's always the kula. So you remember the three different kinds, three different ways to do it. And each time, in the most extreme, the salting is fine, spit is fine, putting on coals in all three cases of machlokas, and then always pass them the kula. What do you want to ask? That's a good question. That's more than more the chabas and some tests. Says the word out. A new child. I umsa. That piece of meat. You want to know, you want to become a sheikh to get all the halachas, but I can't do it. What? All in time, Mr. Shem. Hi umsa, piece of meat. The asmik chalye, where the juice is red. Awesome. Lo asmik chalye, if the juice is not red, show it to the motor. There's a few mahalchim what this more means. I'll say at least, we'll say two. We just said we're going according to the Manda Omar of according to Manda Omar that is mekel. That if you put it onto coals, it is okay. Nevertheless, if afterwards gravy comes out and the gravy is red, says the Gemara that is forbidden. That's the first mahalach in Rashi. Tosfos doesn't like it because Tosfos says I don't understand your Rashi because. If you're saying that the piece of meat is okay because the fire drew it out, why should the juice become awesome? Says, it's the Torah says this, not here, it says like this, that we say like this, that when it's in the meat, it's okay, once it oozes out, it's forbidden. It says, Rashi Tosfos. Rashi got another mahalach, that what happened was like this, you put it onto coals, and then you stuck it into vinegar. Vinegar has the ability to draw blood. And then you want to drink the vinegar. So we've got two malachim. Either it's the juice, and it's a big chiddush, even though the meat is permitted, the juice is forbidden. Or we're talking about where you stuck it in vinegar, and the question is, can you drink the vinegar? And Tisa says, let's just want to Tisa very quickly ask me Khali also first because just well I used to manage khod khiblig sin u khalim kashli echt khitab ignis the pas kan so afa mol mot to go mal khidam na aflik the shaktabi bilo this because I pas but oh Tisa says like it's monashach it's no good. Okay, let's get clear. We've got two malachim. Either the vinegar which you put the piece of meat in, or we're talking about the juice. So again, if it's red, it's forbidden. If it's not red, it's mutter. Ravinoma, I feel like nami chali also it is awesome. Ravina says it's awesome. According to the first Varach of Rashi, of course Ravina says it's awesome. Because according to Ravina, you're not even allowed to eat the meats. Of course the juice is awesome. Okay. I feel like nami chali also. It's impossible that you shouldn't have a little bit of blood inside it. My father would actually swallow down the gravy or the vinegar of this particular piece of meat. A piece of meat which was bruised, you put it on the coals, and then you took it off the coals, and then either you stuck it into vinegar or the juice of gravy came out, either one of those two juices. But Amema would drink it because the son of Amema told Rashi that my father Amema would drink it. The Rashi himself would drink it. Omri Baba Amema Rashi Abo Hai Chalo de Cholit Bechod Zimna Su Loitani Cholit Be. That if you use vinegar to draw out the blood, you can only use it once. That means if you got a piece of meat and you want to draw out the blood, and you use vinegar like salt to draw out the blood, after it's drawn out the blood, you can't then use the same piece of vinegar, the same cup of vinegar, to draw out more blood. So you asked, why is that different from weak vinegar? Weak vinegar, the halach is allowed to use. What's the difference between weak
What's happening, Ben?
Oh,
Okay,
not
you
sure.
all right?
Oh, he's back.
You okay?
Yeah, you.
Yeah. No, it's on silent. It's on mute. Ben is on mute.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I've taken it off you. Thank you, Ian. Thank you. Again, better to use something for the first time, even if it is weak, than to use strong vinegar for the second time. So strong vinegar, once you've used it once, can't be used again. Weak vinegar can be used once, but not more.
That's the same thing.
It's same thing.
Both can't be used again.
Because it's again, even though
it's strong.
even though it's strong, you can't use it more than once. Very good. Okay, it's not with everything. We
Sure.
stop half lines down on Ein Heil Mudalef. Have a very good night. It's not with everything.